Hello, and welcome. Welcome to this quiet corner of the night. Whether you're lying in bed after a long day, resting on a couch with the lights turned low, or simply sitting somewhere comfortable with your eyes growing heavy, you are in the right place. This video was made for you. It was made for this exact moment, this particular hour, when the noise of the day is finally quieted down, and all that remains is the gentle pull of sleep. Before we begin, if you enjoy these kinds of calm, lore-driven stories designed to help you drift off, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like on this video. It genuinely helps more people find these stories when they need them most, late at night, searching for something peaceful to listen to. And if you feel like it, drop a comment down below and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I always love reading those comments in the morning, seeing just how many different corners of the world are falling asleep to the same quiet story. There is something really beautiful about that, but there is absolutely no pressure. If you are already comfortable and do not want to move, that is perfectly fine. Just stay right where you are. Close your eyes whenever you're ready. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands rest wherever they are most comfortable. Tonight, I am going to tell you a story. It is a long story, a deep story, set in the darkest, most terrifying corner of a forgotten underground kingdom. Tonight, we're going to explore the entire lore of Deepnest. Deepnest is a region within the world of Hollow Knight, a vast, beautiful and profoundly melancholic game about a ruined insect civilization buried beneath the earth. And Deepnest is arguably the most terrifying, atmospheric and lore-rich area in the entire game. It is a place of absolute darkness, ancient spiders, tragic queens, and nightmarish predators. But from the safety of your bed, from the comfortable distance of a narrator's voice, the terror transforms into something else entirely. It becomes atmosphere, it becomes texture, it becomes the kind of deep, immersive world building that is perfect for slowly letting go of the waking world. So let us begin. Let us go down. Imagine the descent. Picture it in your mind slowly without urgency. You're leaving the surface behind. The pale grey sky of Dirtmouth, the fading town that sits above the entrance to the kingdom, grows distant. You descend through the well, down through the crumbling stone of the forgotten crossroads, where the ceilings are cracked and the old pathways are choked with orange pulsating vines. The air is cool here, damp, smelling faintly of mineral water and old dust. You continue downward. You pass through the green humidity of the fungal wastes, where massive purple mushrooms grow in the gloom, bouncing silently on their thick, spongy stalks. The air here is thick with spores, a sweet, cloying haze that makes the lungs feel heavy. Somewhere in the distance, the fungal core thrums with a deep, resonant bass note, a heartbeat of the earth. The glow of bioluminescent fungi provides a faint blue-green light, just enough to see by, just enough to feel a full sense of safety. Lower still. You drift past the towering iron-shut gates of the Mantis village. The Mantis Tribe lives here, a proud and fiercely disciplined society of warriors who maintain their silent, eternal vigil. The Sisters of Battle sit on their high thrones, their long bladed arms resting across their laps, their eyes staring forward into the dark. They are the gatekeepers, they are the wall. Beyond their gates lies a place that the rest of the civilized kingdom has deemed too dangerous, too hostile, too fundamentally opposed to order to ever be tamed. And then you pass through. The moisture in the air disappears. The faint ambient glow of the fungi vanishes completely. The stone beneath your imagined feet becomes rough, jagged, threatening. The temperature drops. The silence becomes absolute, and then, slowly, it fills with something worse than silence. A constant low-frequency scratching, the sound of countless unseen legs against rough stone, the soft, sticky tearing of dense webbing being pulled taut, the sudden, sharp hiss of something dropping from the ceiling above, and beneath it all a low, resonant, earth-shaking thrum of massive armoured beasts moving blindly through the tunnels. You have arrived in Deepnest, the darkest place in the world, but you are safe. You are merely an observer tonight, drifting above a long-finished history like a thought floating over a sleeping mind. Nothing in the dark can touch you. Nothing in the story can hurt you. You are listening to an echo. The events we're about to describe happened centuries ago in a kingdom that has already crumbled to dust. So let your breath become slow and steady. Let the weight of your body press comfortably into the surface beneath you, and let us explore the deep. To truly understand Deepnest, you must first understand the kingdom it existed beneath, and the god who built that kingdom. The Pale King, also known as the Worm, was one of the most powerful higher beings in the world of Hollow Knight. Long before Hallownest existed, the Pale King was a colossal, worm-like creature of unimaginable size. He crawled across the surface of the world, his massive body carving trenches into the landscape. We do not know where he came from. We do not know his original purpose. We only know that at some point he arrived at the edge of a vast kingdom of caverns hidden beneath the earth, and he made a choice. He shed his enormous worm form. He left behind his colossal calcified shell in the ash-covered cliffs of what would later be called Kingdom's Edge, and he emerged as a much smaller, pale, luminous bug, a king. He descended into the caverns, carrying with him a divine pale light that had a miraculous effect on the mindless insects that inhabited the darkness below. His light bestowed sapience. It gave the bugs of the caverns the ability to think, to reason, to speak, to build, to dream. He took creatures that had existed for millions of years on pure instinct and gave them consciousness. This was the founding of Hallownest. The Pale King built a grand civilization beneath the earth. He constructed the city of Tears, a breathtaking capital built inside a colossal cavern directly beneath the blue lake. Water from the lake above seeped constantly through the porous rock, creating an eternal, gentle rain that fell over the city day and night. The cobblestone streets were always slick and clean. The lumafly lanterns glowed with a warm yellow light, reflecting off the wet pavement. The architecture was stunning. Dark stone and intricate wrought iron, soaring spires that reached toward the cavern ceiling. It was a place of melancholic, overwhelming beauty. He built a network of stag stations, utilizing the enormous gentle stag beetles to carry passengers and cargo across the vast distances of the kingdom. He commissioned the construction of mechanical tramways, steel carriages that ran on electrified rails, connecting the remote and dangerous regions. He established a knighthood, the 5 great knights, legendary warriors who protected the realm. He created the royal waterways, a labyrinthine system of pipes and reservoirs beneath the city to manage the endless rain. He married the White Lady, a higher being of nature and growth, and together they ruled over what appeared to be an eternal golden age. But the Pale King's light, for all its brilliance, could not reach everywhere. And Deepnest was the proof. Deepnest existed far below the comfortable, well-lit corridors of the capital. It was located in the western reaches of the kingdom, accessible primarily through the Mantis village in the fungal wastes, or through the ancient basin far to the east. It was a place that predated the Pale King's arrival by untold millennia. The creatures that lived there had never needed his light. They had never needed sapience. They were perfectly, lethally adapted to the absolute darkness. The air in Deepnest is completely different from the rest of the kingdom. It is thick, stagnant, and smells sharply of old earth, dry chitin, and the metallic tang of ancient conflict. There is no gentle, cleansing rain here. There are no warm lumafly lanterns strung along the pathways. There is no architecture, no beauty, no order. It is absolute, crushing, claustrophobic darkness. A darkness with weight. A darkness with teeth. When a civilized bug from the Upper Kingdom, perhaps a scholar from the Soul Sanctum or a merchant from the City of Tears, mistakenly descended too far and found themselves crossing the threshold into Deepnest, they were immediately assaulted by the terrifying sensory deprivation. Their eyes, accustomed to the ambient glow of the capital, could not adjust. The darkness was not merely the absence of light. It felt actively hostile, as though the shadows were pressing inward, constricting, suffocating, and the sounds. The sounds were designed by millions of years of evolution to invoke absolute primal terror. The ceaseless scratching, the sudden hiss, the thrum of something enormous just beyond the wall. The inhabitants of Deepnest were predators. They did not build libraries. They did not write philosophical treatises on the nature of consciousness. They did not construct soaring monuments to their king. They hunted, they consumed, they survived, and they had been doing it for so long that their methods had become terrifyingly refined. One of the most remarkable and poignant details of Deepnest is that Cornifer, the cartographer, managed to visit it. Cornifer is a small, gentle, unremarkable bug whose entire life is dedicated to the art of map-making. He appears in every major region of Hallownest, sitting hunched over his papers, humming quietly to himself as he sketches precise, beautifully rendered maps of the area. He is not a warrior. He carries no nail. He has no combat training. He's simply a dedicated, somewhat eccentric academic with an ink stain on his nose and an absolute refusal to let danger interfere with the completeness of his maps. Finding Cornifer in Deepnest is simultaneously heartwarming and deeply unnerving. He is there, sitting in the oppressive dark, his quill scratching rapidly across the parchment, his humming barely audible over the ambient sounds of skittering legs and hissing creatures. He is afraid. That is immediately clear from his dialogue. He speaks quickly, nervously, glancing over his shoulder into the dark. He mentions that the constantly shifting tunnels make mapping almost impossible, that the geography changes when the Garpedes burrow through, that landmarks dissolve and reform overnight. He has been working frantically trying to capture even a partial record of the area before it changes again. But he is there. He went there voluntarily into the most dangerous place in the entire kingdom, armed with nothing but a quill and a stack of paper, because his map of Hallownest had a blank space, and he could not abide a blank space. There is a heroism in Cornifer's dedication that rivals any knight's valour. The 5 great knights fought with legendary weapons against terrifying enemies. Cornifer fights against the unknowable with a piece of paper and a commitment to accuracy. And in many ways, his is the more impressive battle, because the knights were built for combat. Cornifer was built for drawing. His map of Deepnest, the one he sells to the knight, is deliberately incomplete. It has gaps, areas marked with question marks, regions that Cornifer simply could not reach or could not survive long enough to record. It is the only map in the game that acknowledges its own imperfection. Every other map Cornifer produces is thorough, confident, precise. The Deepnest map is hesitant. It is a document that says, effectively, I tried my best, but this place defied me. Even the cartographer, the one character in the game whose entire purpose is to bring order and clarity to the world, was defeated by the chaos of the deep. After selling the map, Cornifer leaves Deepnest. You can later find him back in Dirtmouth in his shop, safe and warm. He survived. The gentle academic walked into the jaws of the most terrifying ecosystem in the world, drew what he could, and walked back out again. It is never explained how he achieved this. Perhaps the creatures simply did not consider him worth the effort. Perhaps his quiet, unassuming presence did not trigger the predatory instincts of the beasts. Perhaps, in the way that a very small, very non-threatening creature can sometimes pass unnoticed through a den of sleeping predators, Cornifer simply slipped through. There is a lesson in Cornifer's survival that applies to your present moment. The quiet, gentle, non-threatening presence is the one that passes unharmed through the dark. You're not agitating the world around you right now. You're not making noise. You're not triggering any alarms. You're simply lying still, breathing softly, slipping quietly through the border between waking and sleeping, just as Cornifer slipped quietly through the border between civilization and the wild dark. The descent into Deepnest, both in the game and in this story, is itself a metaphor for the process of falling asleep. Think about what happens when you close your eyes and begin to drift off. The waking world, with its bright lights, its sharp edges, its constant demands for your attention, begins to recede. The first layers of sleep are like the fungal wastes, warm, still somewhat bright, somewhat recognizable. The mushrooms glow. The spores drift lazily. The air is thick but not hostile. Then you sink deeper. The light fades. The temperature drops. The familiar landmarks of consciousness begin to dissolve. You pass through the Mantis village gates, the last checkpoint of rational, organized thought, and beyond them is the dark, the deep, warm, heavy dark of true sleep. The tunnels of Deepnest in the game twist and wind and loop back on themselves. They are disorienting, they make no logical sense. This is precisely what thoughts do as you approach the border of sleep. Your mind wanders. A thought starts, follows a path for a moment, then turns a corner and becomes a completely different thought. The connections between ideas become loose, irrational, dreamlike. You think about something that happened at work and suddenly you're standing in a field you have not visited since childhood, and the field is made of silk, and the silk is humming, and the hum is the sound of your own breathing, and your breathing is slowing, and the thoughts are dissolving, and the field is fading, and you are sinking, and the dark is warm, and the dark is safe. That is the descent. That is Deepnest. Not a place of horror, not from the safety of your bed, but a map of the journey from waking to sleeping, drawn on parchment by a gentle cartographer who did his best to capture the unknowable and who left the rest as question marks. You're moving through the question marks now, the parts of the map that Cornifer could not draw, the parts of consciousness that defy description, the warm, heavy, shapeless territory between being awake and being asleep, where thoughts lose their edges and the world becomes soft. Perhaps the most fundamental terror of the environment itself was that the tunnels were not carved by tools or designed by architects. The tunnels of Deepnest were organic, dug violently through the solid bedrock by enormous living creatures, the Garpedes. The Garpedes are colossal, heavily armoured centipedes. They are so massive that they completely fill the tunnels they inhabit, their thick, segmented bodies blocking the passage from wall to wall, floor to ceiling. They move with a relentless, unstoppable momentum. Their countless legs tear at the stone, grinding the bedrock into dust as they burrow endlessly back and forth through the earth. They have no apparent goal, no destination, no purpose other than perpetual destructive motion. They simply move, and everything in their path is crushed. Their segmented shells are so incredibly thick, so perfectly impenetrable, that no nail, no spell, no weapon ever forged in the entirety of Hallowness can scratch them. The Hunter's Journal, a bestiary compiled by a mysterious, powerful bug who dedicated their life to cataloguing the creatures of the kingdom, describes the Garpedes not as enemies to be fought, but as environmental hazards to be avoided. They are a force of nature. They are the tides. They are the landslide. You do not fight a landslide, you simply get out of the way. The Hunter's Journal entry for the Garpede can only be completed by inspecting the body of a dead Garpede. This raises a profoundly unsettling question that the game never directly answers. What killed it? What creature, what force exists in the deepest dark that possesses the power to crack that utterly impenetrable shell? Was it old age? Was it starvation? Or was there something even larger, even more terrifying, lurking in tunnels so deep that even the night never reaches them? The Pale King scholars could not answer this question, and that unanswered question is perhaps the most frightening thing about Deepnest. The sheer existence of the Garpedes highlights the profound difference between Deepnest and the Pale King's carefully ordered kingdom. The king built smooth, well-lit roads so his subjects could walk comfortably from one district to another. In Deepnest, the very tunnels themselves are created by immortal, crushing beasts that care nothing for the tiny creatures scuttling through the passages they carve. There are no road signs, there are no maps. The geography shifts constantly, tunnels collapsing and reforming as the Garpedes grind through the stone. It is a labyrinth designed by nothing, for nothing, and it kills without intention. Let yourself pause here. Let the image of the Garped, massive and armoured and unstoppable, slowly fade to a still, quiet shape in your imagination. It is not moving now. The tunnel is silent. The grinding has stopped. The dust has settled. There is nothing but calm, dark, empty stone. Rest in that stillness. If the Garpedes represented the crushing geological weight of Deepnest, then the smaller creatures represented the vicious, omnipresent threat lurking in every shadow, behind every rock, and beneath every footstep. The dirt carvers were the primary scavengers and predators of the upper tunnels. They were vicious, scuttling creatures with razor-sharp forelegs and a relentless, frantic energy. They possessed no advanced tactics, no strategic intelligence. They relied on overwhelming numbers and the devastating advantage of surprise. They sensed vibrations through the stone. A single misplaced footstep, a single careless scrape of a nail against a rock would trigger a sudden terrifying eruption of soil as 3 or 4 dirt carvers burst simultaneously from the ground, slashing wildly with their forelegs before the victim even had time to register what was happening. Some lore scholars have speculated that the dirt carvers might be the juvenile form of the Garpedes. It is a theory that is never confirmed or denied by the game, but the implication is profoundly disturbing. It suggests that the countless, small, aggressive scavengers that the night defeats by the dozens might, given enough time and sustenance, grow into the enormous, invincible juggernauts that grind the earth itself to dust. It implies that Deepnest is not just a collection of dangerous creatures, but an interconnected, self-sustaining ecosystem of escalating horror. This ecosystem functioned with a brutal, elegant efficiency, that would have fascinated the scholars of the Soul Sanctum, had any of them survived long enough to observe it. At the bottom of the food chain were the tiny, almost invisible organisms that fed on the organic detritus drifting down from the upper caverns, the decayed mushroom spores from the fungal wastes, the shed chitin fragments of molting creatures, the occasional corpse that had tumbled down from the forgotten crossroads above. This detritus nourished the bacteria and the microfauna in the soil, which in turn nourished the dirt carvers, which the deeplings and corpse creepers preyed upon, which in turn provided sustenance for the stalking devouts, the apex predators who answered only to Hera herself. Everything consumed something. Everything was eventually consumed by something else. The cycle was perpetual, merciless, and perfectly balanced. The environment itself played an active role in this ecosystem. The darkness of Deepnest is not merely the absence of light. It is a tangible, oppressive presence. It affects the behaviour of every creature that inhabits it. The dirt carvers evolved their vibration sensing ability specifically because sight was useless in the absolute dark. The corpse creeper's mimicry works because in the dark you cannot visually distinguish a living creature from a dead one. You must rely on other senses, and those senses can be deceived. The deepling's erratic, unpredictable movement patterns evolved as a counter to predators who hunted by sound, making it impossible to track their position based on the rhythm of their footsteps. The darkness shaped everything. It was the silent architect of Deepnest's entire biological history. Over millions of years it selected for creatures that could navigate without eyes, hunt without sight, and kill in absolute silence. It punished creatures that made noise, that emitted light, that relied on visual information. It rewarded the quiet, the patient, the still. The most successful predators in Deepnest were the ones that could remain perfectly motionless for the longest time, waiting for a prey to stumble into range by pure statistical inevitability. This is paradoxically comforting to think about right now, because the skill that the darkness rewards most, the ability to lie perfectly still and wait patiently for something to come to you, is exactly what you are doing. You are lying still. You are patient. You are waiting for sleep to find you. And sleep, like prey in the dark, will come. It always comes. You do not need to hunt for it. You do not need to chase it. You simply need to lie still, breathe slowly, and wait. The further one descends into Deepnest, the worse the conditions become. The upper tunnels, while terrifying, are at least geometrically comprehensible. They have floors, walls, and ceilings. They have direction. They have structure. But as you descend past the first few layers, the architecture of the earth itself begins to break down. The tunnels become more organic, more wound-like, as though you are travelling not through carved passageways, but through the internal anatomy of some vast, ancient, sleeping creature. The walls become wet and slightly warm to the touch. The stone takes on an organic texture, ridged and grooved like the inside of a throat. The air becomes heavier, thicker, harder to breathe. The sounds change from the sharp staccato skittering of the upper levels to a deeper, more resonant register, bassy thuds and low, sustained vibrations that you feel more than hear, transmitted through the stone itself into the soles of your feet and up through your skeleton, rattling your teeth. It is here, in these deepest, most oppressive layers, that the true horrors lurk. Not the scavengers, not the ambush predators, but the creatures that have lost all recognizable form, that have been shaped so completely by the absolute darkness that they resemble nothing so much as the darkness itself made solid. Beyond the dirt carvers, The deeper tunnels were home to creatures that represented an even more disturbing level of predatory adaptation. Creatures that did not rely on brute force or numbers, but on psychological manipulation. The deeplings were massive, skittering arachnids that lurched through the wider caverns, their movement erratic and unpredictable, making them terrifying to encounter. But they were at least honest predators. You could see them. You could fight them. They announced their presence with their size and their noise. Far more disturbing were the corpse creepers. To speak of the corpse creepers is to speak of the most horrifying biological adaptation in the entire kingdom. They were parasitic arachnids, heavily armoured, violently aggressive, and possessed of a hunting method that was a masterclass in psychological terror. They did not simply lie in wait in the shadows, they did something far worse. A mature corpse creeper would find the empty, discarded husk of another bug, perhaps a wandering traveller from the forgotten crossroads who had mistakenly descended too far, perhaps an infected husk hornhead whose mind had already been consumed by the Radiance's plague, perhaps even a dead stalking devout, one of the powerful guards of the Beast Queen. The corpse creeper would crawl completely inside this empty shell. Carefully, methodically, it would arrange its own limbs to mimic the posture of a dead, defeated bug. It would lie perfectly still, its legs tucked inside the husk, its breathing imperceptible. To anyone traversing the dark, it appeared to be nothing more than another tragic corpse littering the floor of the ruins. One of hundreds, one of thousands. You could walk past it a dozen times. You could even strike the corpse with your nail, and it would behave exactly like a lifeless object, rolling slightly on the ground before falling still again. But the moment you turned your back, the moment your guard dropped, the moment you took just one step too many past the corpse and shifted your attention elsewhere, the illusion shattered. The dead bug would suddenly jerk upright with a sickening, unnatural suddenness. The husk's head would snap backward at a horrifying angle, and from beneath the shell, the massive, jagged, multiple spider legs of the corpse creeper would violently burst outward, propelling the horrific amalgamation forward to attack with terrifying speed. It was not merely a trap. It was a violation of the one comfort a traveller in the dark could cling to. The dead were supposed to be safe. The dead were supposed to stay dead. In Deepnest, even the corpses were predators. The hunter, the mysterious author of the bestiary, notes this with a grim, twisted amusement, writing that if you find such a beast, you should rejoice, because you have hunted two creatures at once. You can detect a corpse creeper if you are careful. The Dream Nail, a powerful artifact that allows the wielder to read the thoughts of other creatures, will register thoughts emanating from the inhabited husk, even before the creeper is animated. A true corpse has no thoughts. A corpse inhabited by a hungry spider does. It is a small, crucial detail, the kind of survival knowledge that separates the living explorers of Deepness from the dead ones. But you do not need to be an explorer tonight. You do not need the Dream Nail. You do not need to strike at every corpse you see, testing for hidden horrors. You're not navigating the dark. You're simply resting above it, floating, safe, warm, listening to the echo of an ancient history. Let the image of the corpse creeper fade. It is not here. You are here, in your room, in your bed, comfortable. Let your breathing deepen. Let the weight of your eyelids become heavier. We're going to continue deeper into the story now, but we're going deeper slowly, gently, like sinking into warm water. For a long time, this terrible hostile ecosystem remained completely isolated from the expanding light of the Pale King's civilization. The border between the Ordered Kingdom and the chaotic deep was maintained by a single incredible force, the Mantis Tribe. The Mantis Tribe deserves a deep exploration of its own, because their story is inextricably bound to the story of Deepnest. They are in many ways the doormen of the abyss, the last line of civilized defense before the dark swallows everything. The Mantis Tribe was a society built entirely upon martial perfection, strict discipline, and a fierce, unyielding sense of honour. They were elegant, lethal creatures, wielding long, sweeping nail lances with a deadly, practised grace that made even the Pale King's celebrated 5 great knights pause with respect. Their bodies were lean, angular, and perfectly designed for combat. Their limbs were long, ending in sharp, bladed points that could be used as weapons even without the nail lances. They moved with a fluid, terrifying precision that betrayed decades of constant, relentless training. When the Pale King first arrived in the caverns, shedding his worm form and beginning his great project of bestowing sapience upon the mindless insects, the Mantis Tribe refused his light. They did not need it. They already possessed a rigid, ancient culture of their own, built not on the gift of a foreign god, but on the hard-earned virtues of combat, hierarchy, and respect. They were the only major society in the underground world that had achieved organized sapience completely independently of the Pale King's intervention. They had developed language, law, art, and architecture all on their own, deep within the dangerous fungal wastes. Their village was a marvel of minimalist, militaristic design. Every structure served a practical purpose. There were no pleasure houses, no grand ballrooms, no libraries of philosophical debate. There were training halls, armories, supply stores, and the central throne room where the Mantis Lords held court. The walls were decorated not with paintings or tapestries, but with the trophies of vanquished enemies, the masks of stalking devoutes, the cracked shells of dirt carvers, the broken nails of foolish challengers. Every surface told a story of violence, discipline, and survival. The Mantis Tribe was ruled by the Mantis Lords, who sat upon elevated thrones in the centre of the village, watching the endless sparring matches of their warriors below with cold, appraising eyes. To challenge the Mantis Lords was to invite the most difficult, most exhilarating, and most dangerous combat encounter in the kingdom. They fought in coordinated, relentless waves, diving from their thrones with nail lances extended, moving with a speed and precision that bordered on the inhuman. If a challenger managed to defeat them, the Mantis Lords would bow in genuine, deep respect, and the entire tribe would immediately cease hostility toward the victor. It was one of the few encounters in the game where defeating the enemy earns genuine, lasting respect rather than simple survival. Rather than face a devastating, mutually destructive war with this fiercely independent society, the Pale King and the Mantis Lords came to an uneasy but effective truce. The Mantis Tribe would retain their absolute independence and control over their village in the fungal wastes. They would not worship the king, they would not adopt his customs, they would not send representatives to his court, they would not participate in his economy or his social hierarchy. In exchange, they agreed to guard the primary entrance to Deepnest, acting as a permanent, lethal, and completely incorruptible wall between the king's delicate, civilized world and the crawling, hungry horrors below. This arrangement held for the entirety of the Golden Age. The Mantis village became a fortress of quiet, terrifying discipline. The sound of sparring, the rhythmic clash of nail lances, and the patient sharpening of metal echoed through their halls day and night. Any creature from Deepnest that attempted to breach the gate was met with the devastating, coordinated fury of the Mantis warriors and was swiftly, mercilessly cut down. The Mantises maintained their end of the bargain with a pride and thoroughness that put the Pale King's own military to shame. But when the infection returned, sweeping through the kingdom with its golden plague, the Mantis Tribe faced a terrible test of their resolve. The Radiance's influence crept into the dreams of every sleeping creature. The Mantises, despite their discipline, were not immune to the temptation of the golden light. The majority of the Mantis Lords remained absolutely steadfast. They locked their village gates. They commanded their warriors to adhere strictly to their training, utilizing their absolute physical and mental discipline to reject the insidious whispers of the Moth Goddess. They survived the infection by effectively choosing not to dream at all, locking their minds into a constant waking state of martial focus. They sacrificed rest itself to remain pure. But one of the Mantis Lords was not as strong. This lord looked at the golden plague sweeping through the caverns and saw not a sickness, but a source of immense physical power. The infection swelled the bodies of the afflicted, granting them terrifying unnatural strength. This lord, consumed by a desire for power that overrode honour, willingly embraced the light of the Moth Goddess. The infection was taken willingly into that body. The lord grew massive, twisted and swollen with the orange plague. The lean, elegant form became bloated and grotesque, the nail lance replaced by enormous orange-slicked claws. When the other lords discovered this betrayal, they cast the traitor out. This was a profound, heartbreaking schism within the tribe. The fallen lord, now known as the Traitor Lord, was exiled from the village along with the Mantises who had followed into madness. They retreated not back to Deepnest, but to the lush, overgrown pathways of the Queen's Gardens to the west, establishing a violent, infected colony among the thorns and the acid pools. It was there, in the Queen's Gardens, that the Traitor Lord's infected forces encountered fierce Drya, one of the Pale King's 5 great knights, standing guard outside the White Lady's cocoon. Drya fought off wave after wave of infected mantises, protecting her queen until her own body gave out. She died standing, her nail still clutched in her hand, surrounded by the broken bodies of her opponents. It was there too that the tragedy of Zayma, the Grey Mourner, was cemented. Zayma's secret lover is strongly implied to have been a mantis connected to the Traitor Lord's clan, perhaps even his own child. When the traitor embraced the infection, this beloved was caught in the crossfire. She died, and Zayma retreated to the resting grounds to spend eternity weeping over a single delicate flower. The remaining Mantis Lords stayed behind in the village, sitting on their thrones in the dark, their nail lances resting across their laps. They keep their end of the bargain with the Pale King to this day, maintaining their vigil over the entrance to Deepnest, long after the king himself has turned to dust in a hidden dream. They do not speak, they do not sleep, they do not eat. They simply wait, and they fight anything that approaches. Their loyalty is not to the dead king, but to the principle of the bargain itself. Honour once given is never revoked. That is the Mantis way. The Mantis Tribe's story is a microcosm of the broader tragedy of Hallownest. It is a story of how the infection tore families apart, how the pursuit of power corrupted the honourable, and how sheer, unyielding, stubborn discipline was the only way to survive the slow death of the world. But the Pale King, in his towering hubris, could not tolerate even a single unconquered frontier. He possessed the mind of a god and the ambition of an empire builder. He looked at the maps of his vast subterranean world, saw the massive blank space designated as Deepnest, and believed that the forward progress of his gleaming kingdom was simply inevitable. If the bugs of Hallow Nest could tame the Crystal Peak, mine its riches, and build a grand city beneath the eternal reign of the Blue Lake, then surely they could extend their reach into the dark. He made a decision that would prove to be one of his most catastrophic failures. He ordered the extension of his grand mechanical tramway system directly into the upper tunnels of Deepnest. It was an unmitigated disaster from the very first day. The Pale King dispatched his finest engineers and construction workers down into the dark, armed with metal tools, humming machinery, electric wiring, heavy steel rails, and the arrogant belief that industry and light could overcome millions of years of predatory evolution. They began drilling through the tough, jagged stone, trying to carve a civilized, electrified transit route through a predator's den. The sheer noise of the construction was catastrophic. The grinding of drills against stone, the deafening clatter of steel rails being hammered into place, the shouts of the foremen echoing down the tunnels, the bright flickering light of their work lamps cutting through the darkness for the first time in millennia. To the denizens of Deepnest, this was not an invasion. They did not possess the political capacity to understand the concept of borders or territorial sovereignty. They did not call emergency councils or draft declarations of war. They simply perceived a sudden, noisy incursion of soft, vulnerable and readily available prey. The workers were trying to lay tracks while constantly fending off the scuttling dirt carvers that burst from the earth at the vibration of every hammer strike. But the dirt carvers were merely the appetizers. The true horror came from the most intelligent and fiercely loyal members of Deepnest's caste system, the Stalking Devouts. The Stalking Devouts were not feral scavengers. They were the heavily armoured shock troops and personal guards of the Beast Queen. They acted as the enforcers of Deepnest's hierarchy, the elite warrior class. A Stalking Devout is a massive creature, easily twice the size of a normal bug. It wears thick, impenetrable armour made of hard-plated foreclaws that completely cover its face and upper body. Let that image linger. Let it become the texture of this moment. Deep within Deepnest, in a hidden chamber, accessible only through a series of obscure, easily missed passages, resides one of the most enigmatic figures in the entire kingdom, the Mask Maker. The Mask Maker is an ancient being of unknown origin, sitting cross-legged in a small, cluttered room surrounded by hundreds, perhaps thousands, of musks of every shape and size. The musks hang from the ceiling, they are stacked against the walls, they cover the floor. Some are large and ornate, clearly designed for powerful creatures. Some are tiny, delicate, almost fragile. The Mask Maker speaks in slow, thoughtful riddles, suggesting that a bug's mask is the truest expression of its identity, and that the face beneath is, in some fundamental way, less real than the face it presents to the world. This philosophy is deeply relevant to Deepnest. Masks are enormously significant in the lore of Hollow Knight. The Pale King wore a mask. The Dreamers wore masks. The Knight wears a mask. In Deepnest, the Stalking Devouts wear their massive armoured masks. Even the Corpse Creepers, in a twisted way, wear the masks of the dead. The Mask Maker implies that consciousness itself, the very sapience that the Pale King granted, is tied to the mask, not the biology beneath it. A shell without a mask is just a shell. A mask without a shell is still somehow a face. The Mask Maker freely offers to help the knight, and there is no hostility in the encounter. It is a rare moment of peaceful contemplation in the most hostile environment in the game. The Mask Maker simply sits, surrounded by faces in the dark, pondering the nature of identity. How fitting that such a philosopher would choose to live in Deepnest, the one place in the kingdom where identity is most frequently stolen, mimicked, and destroyed. The broader ecosystem of Deepnest also includes less prominent but equally unsettling inhabitants. The tunnels are filled with the ambient sounds of grub mimics, false containers that appear identical to the glass jars containing the imprisoned grubs that the knight rescues throughout the game. The grub mimic sits in its jar, squeaking and bouncing in a perfect imitation of a real grub. But when the knight breaks the jar, instead of a grateful, rescued grub bouncing free, a horrifying, toothy, aggressive creature leaps out, attacking with wild, frantic energy. Like the corpse creepers, the grub mimics exploit trust. They weaponize the player's instinct to help and rescue. There are also the little weavers, small, low-level spider creatures that inhabit the upper tunnels. They scuttle across the walls and ceilings, dropping down on thin threads to attack. They are the children of the Weaver tribe, left behind when the adults fled to Farloom, or perhaps simply the lesser feral cousins of the intelligent weavers. Their presence is a constant reminder of the silk that once held everything together. And the deep hunters, floating jellyfish-like creatures that drift through the wider caverns, expelling damaging fluids when they burst. They move slowly, silently, their translucent bodies barely visible in the dark. They are not aggressive, they are simply present, floating through the void like living landmines, a passive danger in a world full of active ones. Each of these creatures contributes to the overwhelming, suffocating atmosphere of Deepnest. It is not a place designed to kill you quickly. It is a place designed to kill you slowly, through attrition, through the gradual erosion of your health, your resources, your confidence, and your hope. Every encounter, every trap, every mimic and every false corpse is a tiny cut, and in Deepnest you bleed from 1,000 tiny cuts. But you're not bleeding tonight. You're perfectly safe. Your health is full. Your resources are infinite. You're listening to a story, not living one. Let the image of the creatures fade into the warm, dark background of your imagination. They are part of the scenery now, not threats. Like paintings on a wall in a dimly lit museum, interesting to glance at but unable to step off the canvas. The Weavers. The Weavers were an anomaly within Deepnest, and indeed within the entire world of Hollow Knight. They were not native to Hallownest. They owed absolutely nothing of their intelligence, their culture, or their identity to the Pale King. They had migrated to this dark corner of the world from a distant, unknown, and fiercely guarded land called Farloom. They were a sophisticated, ancient tribe of highly intelligent spiders who brought with them a profound, magical understanding of their environment that was entirely unique. To the Weavers, silk was not merely an architectural tool for catching prey or building nests. It was something far deeper. It was an extension of their will. It was a magical conduit, a medium through which they channeled their collective consciousness and history. It was, in a very real sense, a language. The Weavers did not write their history on stone tablets, as the scholars of the Soul Sanctum did. They did not carve their remembrances into the walls, as the Pale King did with his grand statues. They wove their history directly into the very fabric of their dens. Every thread in the Weaver's den contained information. The patterns, the tension, the colour, the way the strands vibrated when touched, all of it communicated something to those who could read it. They could weave spells of protection that would ward away hostile creatures. They could weave memories into tangible physical threads that could be unravelled and re-experienced by future generations. They could build incredibly durable, beautiful structures out of the shining, silvery strands, structures that were stronger than the Pale King steel and far more adaptable. The Weaver's Den was a sprawling, intricate colony hidden deep within the dark, far from the prying eyes of the capital. It was a place of quiet, focused industry. The massive looms clicked and clacked in the dark, operated by dozens of patient, silent workers, weaving spells and stories simultaneously. The silk they produced served as both infrastructure and archive. The walls of the den were libraries, the bridges were histories, the traps were incantations. Everything had dual purpose, everything was meaningful. While the weavers were highly intelligent and fully capable of diplomacy, they were deeply reclusive. They had no interest in joining the Pale King's civilization. They had seen kingdoms rise and fall before. They preferred to observe the trajectory of Hallownest from the safety of their vibrating webs, recording the king's triumphs and his arrogance in their silken tapestries like silent, eight-legged historians. They knew, with the quiet certainty of a very old civilization, that the worm's light would eventually flicker and die. They had seen it before. They had a connection to Hornet, the daughter of the Pale King and the Beast Queen. Hornet was raised in part among the weavers. They taught her the art of silk, the ability to weave threads as both a weapon and a tool. It is why Hornet fights with such a distinctive, fluid, thread-based style, throwing her needle and pulling it back with silver silk. She is the most direct living legacy of the weaver's art. The weaver's relationship with the broader kingdom of Hallownest is one of the most philosophically interesting dynamics in the game. They were present in Hallownest for the entirety of its history, from the Pale King's arrival to the Infection's apocalypse, yet they never participated. They never joined. They never contributed soldiers to the king's armies, scholars to his academies, or workers to his infrastructure projects. They simply watched, recorded, and waited. They were the silent audience to a play that everyone else was performing in. This gives them a unique perspective. The Pale King's citizens, the bugs of the City of Tears, the scholars of the Soul Sanctum, the warriors of the Knighthood, were all deeply invested in the survival of Hallownest. They had built their identities around the kingdom. When it started to fall, they panicked, they fought, they sacrificed, they died. But the weavers had always known it would fall. Their silk told them so. Every kingdom falls. Every light fades. Every god eventually forgets why they started caring, or their worshippers forget to keep caring for them. The cycle is as natural as the seasons, as inevitable as the erosion of stone by water. The weavers understood this with the calm acceptance of beings who have outlived multiple civilizations. This is why their departure from Hallownest is not portrayed as a tragedy. It is not a desperate flight. It is a methodical, orderly evacuation. They pack their histories. They leave behind a charm to remember them by. They even leave a final small weaver behind, as though placing a bookmark in a story they might return to someday. The weavers do not grieve for Hallownest. They simply close the chapter and move on to the next one. There is something deeply calming about that level of acceptance. The weavers understood that endings are natural, that loss is natural, that sleep, in its own way, is just another form of letting go. The silk itself, as a concept, is deeply intertwined with the game's broader themes of connection and memory. In Hollow Knight, the things that bind the world together are threads. The dreamer's seal is, metaphorically, a binding. The chains that hold the Hollow Knight are literal bindings. The relationships between parents and children, between kings and subjects, between gods and worshippers, are all forms of connection, of threads pulled taut between 2 points. And just like silk, these connections can be strong and beautiful, or they can be fragile and easily cut. The weavers understood this better than anyone, because silk was their entire existence. They lived in threads. They thought in threads. They recorded history in threads. And when the time came to leave, they cut the threads cleanly and moved on. You can feel those threads loosening now in your own body. The connections between your conscious mind and the waking world are thinning, growing slack, growing comfortable. The thread that ties you to your to-do list is getting thinner. The thread that ties you to your phone is getting thinner. The thread that ties you to the noise and the light and the obligations of the day is getting so thin that it is almost invisible, a gossamer strand catching nothing, going nowhere, barely there at all. And soon, when you are ready, it will break, and you will drift, and that will be fine. The weavers also played a crucial role in shaping Hornet's understanding of the dream realm and the nature of the seal. The seal of binding that contains the hollow night is, in many ways, a form of woven spell. It is a web of magical energy created by 3 dreaming minds stretched across the entrance to the temple of the Black Egg, holding the god within. The weavers may have contributed fundamental knowledge to the design of this seal, though the game never explicitly confirms or denies this. What is confirmed is that Hornet, trained by the weavers, is the only character in the game who seems to fully understand both the nature of the seal and the nature of the void that opposes the radiance. She is the bridge, not just between light and dark, but between understanding and action. The weight of Hornet's connection to Deepnest is difficult to overstate. She is the living intersection of every thread in the region's story. The daughter of the beast and the worm, trained by the weavers, protecting the seal that her mother powers with her eternal sleep. Every time Hornet walks through the tunnels of Deepnest, she walks through her own history. The silk on the walls was woven by her teachers. The guards in the corridors served her mother. The altar in the beast den is where the person she loves most chose to close her eyes forever. Hornet carries all of this silently, with the discipline the mantises taught her, and the resilience the dark instilled in her. She guards the seals, knowing that one day they must be broken, and that when they are, she will lose the last sleeping remnant of her mother. It is a burden she carries without complaint, because that is what the daughter of a queen and a god must do. The Society of Deepnest, comprising both the chaotic, feral beasts and the intelligent, magically gifted weavers, shared a complex, layered social structure. And sitting at the absolute apex of this dark hierarchy, ruling over both the mindless predators and the ancient spider scholars, was a singular, terrifying, and profoundly tragic figure, Hera the Beast. She was a fascinating, beautiful contradiction. Hera was not a weaver herself. By the strict ancient caste system that governed the deep, she was considered an ordinary common beast of Deepnest. She did not possess the elegant, magical silk craft of the Farloom migrants. She did not come from a lineage of scholars or artisans. Yet, through sheer, undeniable force of will, through the raw, terrifying physical power she commanded, and through a political cunning that would have impressed even the Pale King himself, she rose to absolute queenship. She possessed a fierce, unquestioned authority over the most dangerous corner of the world. Even the weavers, with all their ancient magic and their quiet, scholarly superiority, deferred to the beast. She was the undisputed ruler of the dark. Despite her immense power, despite her unquestioned authority over the most dangerous place in the world, Hera was plagued by a quiet, persistent sorrow that echoed loudly through the dark. Hera desperately wanted a child, but she could not produce one. The game does not explain the precise nature of this biological failing, whether it was unique to Hera or a broader difficulty among the creatures of Deepnest. What it makes absolutely clear is that Hera's inability to bear an heir was the defining tragedy of her life. It was not merely a political inconvenience, it was a deep, personal, devastating sorrow that shaped every decision she would eventually make. Hera, as the Queen of Deepnest, felt this failing more acutely than anyone. Her greatest, most profound sadness, a vulnerability she hid behind her terrifying title and her impenetrable political authority, was her inability to produce an heir. She was not merely a queen wanting a successor for political stability. She was a mother wanting a child. She wanted a daughter to hold, to raise, to teach the ways of the dark, to eventually lead the fragmented, squabbling tribes of Deepnest after she was gone. She possessed all the power in the dark, all the strength, all the loyalty. But she could not create life. Let that sadness settle gently. You do not need to carry Hera's sorrow. It is an ancient, resolved grief. It belongs to a story that has already ended. Relax the muscles in your jaw. Let your shoulders drop a fraction of an inch further. Let the tension in your face smooth out, like a tightly woven thread finally being allowed to go slack. You are merely listening to an echo. The sadness has already happened. It cannot hurt you. As the decades passed, the Pale King's eternal kingdom above began to fracture. The Radiance, the ancient forgotten moth goddess of dreams and light, began to stir in the dream realm. She had been the original deity of the underground world, worshipped by the Moth Tribe long before the Pale King arrived. When the worm appeared and offered sapience, the moths abandoned the Radiance in favour of the new god's gifts. This betrayal drove the Radiance to a burning, genocidal rage. She began actively infecting the minds of Hallownest's citizens through their dreams, forcing her blinding, golden light into their sleeping minds, turning them into mindless, violent, orange-eyed husks. The Pale King, desperate to save his legacy, developed a horrifying plan. He would breed a living vessel in the abyss, a creature born of his own divine essence and the dark void, hollowed out of all thought, emotion, and will. This vessel, the Hollow Knight, would be used to trap the Radiance within itself forever, and then, to seal the prison, the king would bind the doors of the Temple of the Black Egg with the magical, eternal power of three beings known as the Dreamers. To make the seal absolutely unbreakable, he needed beings of immense power to anchor it. He successfully recruited Lurien the Watcher, the devoted noble who had spent his life observing the City of Tears from his tower, and Monomon the Teacher, the brilliant jellyfish-like researcher who oversaw the archives in Fog Canyon. Both agreed to sacrifice their waking lives, entering an eternal magical sleep to power the seal. But for his third and final anchor, the king needed a different kind of power. He needed the raw, untamed, terrifying strength of the wild. He needed the resilience of the dark. He needed the beast. He needed Hera. When the Pale King travelled down into the miserable, oppressive depths of Deepnest to parley with the Beast Queen, he did not come with shining armies or arrogant declarations of war. He had learned his lesson from the failed tramway. He came quietly. He came alone. He came with a bargain. The worm, a god of light, order, and infinite creation, and Hera, the common beast and ferocious queen of the dark, made an unfathomable pact in the shadows. It is arguably the single most important political bargain in the entire history of Hallownest. Hera would agree to become a dreamer. She would lay down on her stone bed, close her eyes forever to the waking world, and trap her own powerful mind within the dream realm to act as the final, strongest lock on the infection's prison. She would sacrifice everything: her kingdom, her authority, her waking life, her freedom. She would become a sleeping anchor, a living lock, dreaming forever in the dark. In exchange for this incomprehensible sacrifice, the Pale King would grant her the single thing she could not achieve herself. He would use his divine, worm-born nature to give her a child. This bargain resulted in the birth of Hornet, the gendered child. Hornet is perhaps the most complex and significant figure in the entire history of Hallownest. She's a being forged from two entirely opposed worlds. She's the daughter of the Pale King's blinding, ordered light, and she is the daughter of the beast's dark, predatory, chaotic strength. She carries within her the blood of a god and the spirit of a monster. She was raised partly in the illuminated halls of the White Palace, learning the customs and the politics of the capital, and partly in the silken, dangerous tunnels of the Weaver's Den in Deepnest, learning the art of silk and the ways of survival. She fights with the fluid, devastating grace of a mantis warrior, but she utilizes the magical silk of Farloom. She moves with incredible speed, throwing her needle and pulling it back on a glinting thread. She is the living, breathing embodiment of a compromise made at the very end of the world. She is the product of a desperate deal between light and dark, and she is the only member of the Pale King's lineage who was not born in the abyss to be sacrificed. The tragedy of the bargain was that Hera had agonizingly little time to simply be a mother. The infection was spreading too quickly above. The radiance was burning through the minds of the citizens. Every day the seal was delayed, more bugs fell to the orange plague. The king's plan had to be enacted immediately, before there was no one left to save. Imagine the profound, suffocating heartbreak of that singular moment. A queen who had entirely defined her existence by the desperate need for an heir, finally holding her tiny daughter, feeling the weight of Hornet in her arms, looking at the small pale face that combined her own dark features as the luminous pallor of the worm, and knowing with absolute inescapable certainty that she had traded her own waking life for this child's existence. The time she spent with Hornet was terribly, painfully brief. A few months, perhaps, maybe less. Every moment was shadowed by the knowledge that each day was one day closer to the eternal sleep. And then the day came. Hera passed her daughter into the care of the Weavers, trusting them to raise Hornet in the ways of the dark after she was gone, and she retreated to the distant village. The distant village is a terrifying architectural marvel, one of the most unsettling locations in the entire game. It is a heavily fortified, web-choked complex of stone buildings suspended directly over a bottomless abyss in the very farthest western edge of Deepnest. The buildings are connected by narrow, web-strung walkways that sway gently over the void. The walls are covered in a thick, white, sticky silk that muffles all sound. The only light is the faint, ambient glow of scattered lumaflies trapped in glass jars, casting long, distorted shadows. It was here, within the innermost chamber known as the Beast's Den, that Hera prepared for the eternal sleep. She was assisted in this final ritual by the midwife. The midwife is one of the most deeply unsettling characters in the entire game. She is an ancient, enormous arachnid servant of Deepnest, residing hidden behind a breakable wall in the distant village. If you were to encounter her, she would initially appear quite calm and conversational. Her long, segmented face would turn toward you, and she would speak softly of Deepnest's history, of her loyalty to Hera, and of her affection for the young hornet. She describes Hornet with a deeply unsettling tenderness, calling her a plump, juicy little morsel. The language is affectionate, but the predatory imagery is inescapable. The midwife is starving. She's been alone in the dark for far too long, trapped in a collapsed section of the village, her queen sleeping, her purpose unfulfilled. After sharing a few quiet, lore-filled words, her serene face suddenly snaps open. The calm, segmented outer shell splits apart to reveal a massive, cavernous mouth, absolutely filled with layers upon layers of razor-sharp fangs. She lunges forward in a terrifying, sudden attempt to devour whoever is standing in front of her. She's the only NPC in the entire game that can damage the knight but cannot be killed. She's also one of the very few NPCs who is fully aware when the dream nail is used on her. Instead of revealing her thoughts, she screams, desperately and violently, for the intruder to get out of her head. This simple detail is deeply unsettling. Most bugs are unaware of the dream nail's intrusion. The midwife is not only aware, she is terrified of it. But you are safe from the midwife tonight. Her mouth is closed, her wall is sealed, she is resting in her darkness, and you are resting in yours. Despite her terrifying predatory nature, the midwife was fiercely, absolutely loyal to Hera. She assisted the Beast Queen in lying down upon her sacrificial altar. Perhaps she held Hera's claw. Perhaps she whispered words of comfort in the dark. We do not know, because the game never shows us the actual moment. It gives us only the aftermath. As Hera closed her eyes for the last time, the midwife and the stalking devout sealed the entrances to the beast's den. They wrapped the doorways in thick layered webbing. They positioned guards in the corridors. They set traps. The final glowing white mask, the symbol of the dreamers, materialized over Hera's sleeping face. And in that moment, Hera the Beast, the common creature who had clawed her way to queenship over the most terrifying place in the world, became the third and final lock in the prison of the sun. Unlike the other dreamers, Monomon and Lurien, Hera left no instructions. She created no contingency plans. She expressed no lingering philosophical doubts about whether the seal should eventually be broken. She simply made the trade, closed her eyes, and went to sleep. When you walk through the distant village now, centuries later, the atmosphere is intensely oppressive, but in a different way than the rest of Deepnest. The feral, unthinking danger of the outer tunnels has been replaced by something more insidious. It is a trap, designed with chilling intelligence. The buildings of the distant village are filled with cultists. These are mindless, infected bugs who sit completely frozen on comfortable wooden benches inside the houses, arranged in careful, inviting rows. To a weary traveller stumbling through the dark, desperately seeking a safe place to rest, the distant village looks like a miracle. It looks like a haven. The benches are stable. The walls provide shelter. A bug might sit down, let out a sigh of relief, and close their eyes for just a moment. The moment they do, the trap springs. The cultists animate. The webs tighten around the entrances. The stalking devouts emerge from the shadows. The weary traveller is captured, cocooned and preserved as food for the beasts. It is an absolutely diabolical piece of environmental storytelling, a place that weaponizes the most basic survival instinct, the need for rest, and turns it into a death sentence. But deep within that trap, past the cultists and the devouts, and the layers of webbing, Hera simply sleeps. She is not hunting. She is not trapping. She's simply a mother who made a deal with a god and went to sleep so that her daughter might live. When the protagonist, the knight, finally navigates the terrifying maze of the beast's den, and finds Hera, there is no grand battle. There is no roaring monster. There is just a large, still bug lying on a stone bed, a white glowing mask covering her face, her breathing slow and deep and endless. When the dream nail finally strikes her, and the magical energy that sustains her physical form is severed from the dream realm, breaking the third seal, Hera's body dissolves quietly. The mask fades. The altar is empty. Hornet simply appears by the empty stone bed. She does not raise her nail to fight. She does not scream. She simply stands in the dark, her head bowed, her needle lowered. She grieves quietly, acknowledging that her mother's time, effectively over since the moment of the bargain, has now truly and finally passed. It is a quiet, restrained, deeply respectful end to the ruler of the most dangerous place in the world. Let that grief settle softly. Let it be a distant thing, like the sound of rain heard through a thick wall. You do not need to grieve tonight. You are merely listening. Let your breath continue to slow. Let the weight of your body continue to sink. There is one more aspect of the distant village that deserves attention, because it speaks to a larger truth about Deepnest design. The bench trap, the cultists arranged on wooden seats, the false promise of safety, is not merely a clever gameplay mechanic. It is a meditation on the vulnerability of rest. In the world of a hollow night, benches are sacred. They are the only places in the entire kingdom where the night is truly safe. Sitting on a bench saves your progress, restores your soul, and allows you a moment of quiet in the chaos. The benches in Dirtmouth, in the City of Tears, in the Resting Grounds, are genuine sanctuaries. The player learns, through repetition and trust, that a bench means safety. The bench is the one constant in a world of danger. The bench is always reliable. The distant village subverts this trust with surgical precision. It presents benches that are not benches, safety that is not safety, rest that is a trap. The fundamental contract between the game and the player, the promise that rest is always safe, is broken in this single, horrifying location. And this is precisely what makes Deepnest so uniquely terrifying in the context of the game. It attacks the meta-level expectations of the player. It punishes trust itself. And yet, right now, your bed is not a trap. Your couch is not a trap. Your pillow is not a corpse creeper. Your blanket is not a web. This safety you feel right now is genuine. The warmth is real. The stillness is real. The difference between you and the unfortunate bug who sat down on a bench in the distant village is that your rest is actually rest. You have nothing to fear from relaxing. You have nothing to fear from closing your eyes. You have nothing to fear from letting go. Let us talk about the sounds of Deepnest for a moment, because they are integral to its atmosphere, and because sound is a bridge between the game and your current experience of lying in the dark, listening to a voice. Deepnest has the most distinctive, most layered, and most terrifying soundscape in the entire game. The music, composed by Christopher Larkin, is not really music in the traditional sense. It is an ambient wash of unsettling textures, low, droning strings that hover just beneath the threshold of melody, scratching, skittering, percussive sounds that mimic the movement of insects across stone, high, thin, whistling tones that could be wind through narrow tunnels or the distant keening cry of something alive and hungry. The soundscape serves a dual purpose. It makes the player intensely aware of the environment, and it makes them feel intensely alone. The sounds of Deepnest are the sounds of a world that is alive without you. The scratching continues whether you are there or not. The droning continues. The hissing, the clicking, the faint, distant thuds. They are all part of a vast, indifferent machine of predation and survival that was running for millions of years before you arrived and will continue running long after you leave. But here is the interesting thing about those sounds. If you strip away the context, if you remove the knowledge that these sounds represent danger, they become oddly soothing. Low drones are, physiologically, one of the most relaxing sounds a human being can listen to. Rhythmic, repetitive scratching sounds, like rain on a window or the ticking of a clock, are well-documented sleep aids. Even the high, thin whistling tones, when heard from a safe distance, are not unlike the sound of wind through a cracked window on a cold night, a sound many people find deeply comforting. The terror of Deepnest's soundtrack is not in the sounds themselves, it is in what those sounds represent. And since you are not in Deepnest, since you are lying safely in your bed, the sounds can represent whatever you want them to represent. The low drone is the hum of your heating system. The scratching is the rustle of your blanket as you shift slightly. The high, thin whistle is the wind outside your window. The distant thuds are the footsteps of someone in another room, moving through their own evening routine, their own quiet rituals before sleep. The sounds of the world around you are not threatening. They are familiar. They are domestic. They are the sounds of a life that is pausing for the night, turning down its volume, dimming its lights, settling into the comfortable routine silence that comes before sleep. Listen to those sounds now, whatever they are. The hum of electricity, the distant murmur of traffic, the ticking of a clock, the slow rhythmic breathing of someone sleeping nearby. The creak of a house settling, the rain if there is rain, the wind if there is wind, the silence if there is silence. Whatever you hear, let it be the soundtrack of your rest. Let it be your Deepnest, stripped of its teeth, stripped of its claws, stripped of everything except the low, warm, endless drone of a world that continues to exist, whether you are awake to observe it or not. You do not need to observe it tonight. The world will be here tomorrow. It will continue humming, clicking, droning, existing, whether you're awake or not. You can let go of the obligation to pay attention. You can let the sounds fade into the background, merging with the warm, heavy darkness behind your eyelids, becoming indistinguishable from the soft, rhythmic pulse of your own heartbeat. Nosk. Nosk was not a bug. Not really. It was a psychological predator, a shifting, infected mass of biological mimicry that had evolved specifically to exploit the one thing that every creature in the dark possesses, the desire to see a familiar face. Nosk understood instinctively on some deep predatory level that the physical defences of its prey, their armour, their nails, their spells, their combat training were utterly useless if the prey willingly walked into the trap. And to make the prey walk willingly, you had to give it its grotesque, multi-legged horror. Its body is swollen with the orange blisters of the infection. Its legs are long, thin, and ending in sharp, stabbing points. It moves with erratic, terrifying speed, scrambling across the floor and ceiling with no regard for gravity. Its movements are unpredictable, jerking and lunging and retreating in patterns that defy anticipation. It has no discernible thoughts, no intelligence beyond the pure, distilled instinct to kill. When the dream nail is used on Nosk, it reveals nothing. No thoughts, no memories, just emptiness and hunger. Nosk hunts not just bodies, but the comfort of recognition. It preys on hope itself, using the instinct to trust a familiar face to lead its victims willingly into a room full of corpses. It is perhaps the most psychologically disturbing creature in the entire game. Upon defeat, Nosk bursts apart in a shower of infection, leaving behind only its counterfeit shell and a piece of pale ore, a rare, valuable crafting material. The shell collapses on the floor, empty, no longer mimicking anything, just a hollow costume discarded after the performance of death. In the pantheon of the gods, in the ethereal realm of Godhome, an even more powerful variant of Nosk appears. This version initially takes the form of Hornet, standing serenely in the arena, her needle at her side. When the battle begins, the Hornet form tears apart, revealing a winged, even more aggressive version of the nightmare creature. It is a deeply disturbing encounter because it subverts the player's trust in one of the game's most recognizable and beloved characters. But Nosk is gone now. It has been defeated. Its lair is empty. The false reflections have stopped appearing in the corridors. The corpses have settled. The silence in the chamber is complete. You do not need to follow any shadows tonight. You do not need to investigate any strange reflections. You do not need to walk down any dark hallways toward anything that looks familiar. You possess the greatest defense against Nosk's kind of predation. Stillness. You're not walking. You're not pursuing. You're lying still, breathing softly, and the lure has nothing to hook into. You are safe. Let us continue deeper into the history, but slower now. Let the pace of the words match the pace of your breathing, in and out, slow and steady. The story is entering its twilight. The kingdom is beginning to fall. The weavers, those ancient, intelligent, silk-spinning spiders from the distant land of Farloom, eventually realized that the kingdom above was doomed. Their silk-woven histories, stretching back far beyond the Pale King's arrival, far beyond even the memory of the Radiance's first worship, had recorded the rise and fall of civilizations before. The old threads told stories of other kingdoms, other gods, other lights that burned too brightly and eventually consumed themselves. They recognized the pattern. They recognized the signs. The infection was spreading too rapidly through Hallownest, and it was beginning to reach even into the deep. The Radiance's golden plague was not merely an affliction of the mind. It was a physical transformation. The infection mutated the spiders of Deepnest, causing them to erupt with glowing orange tumours that burst through their carapaces. Their eyes, once sharp and calculating, became clouded with a blank burning gold. Their movements lost their predatory precision and became jerky, erratic, driven not by instinct but by the burning, mindless rage of the moth goddess. Even the protective wards woven by the weavers began to fray. The silk, which had held the beasts of Deepnest in careful, balanced check for generations, was losing its magical potency. The infection seemed to corrode the enchantments, weakening the threads, dulling the protective vibrations. The very infrastructure that the weavers had built, their libraries, their bridges, their barriers, was crumbling from the inside. The weavers made a decision, a painful, historic decision that would mark the end of their presence in Hallownest forever. They would not stay and die. They would not fight a losing battle against a plague that attacked through dreams, a medium that not even their silk could shield against. They would leave. They packed their silken belongings, their looms, their thread, their woven histories, the accumulated magical knowledge of an entire civilization. They gathered their families, their children, their elderly, and they fled Hallownest entirely. Most of the Weaver tribe journeyed back through the dark tunnels of Deepnest, following paths they had memorized centuries ago. They passed the rusting hulks of the failed tramway, past the sealed gates of the Mantis village, up through the crumbling, infection-choked passages of the forgotten crossroads, and eventually reached the surface. From there, they attempted the long, perilous, unknowable journey back to their distant homeland of Farloom. We do not know if they made it. We do not know what Farloom looks like. We do not know what awaited them there, whether it was a homecoming or another catastrophe. All we know is that they left, and they did not return. But before they departed, they left something behind. A small, powerful, magical charm woven from their very finest silk. It is called the Weaver Song, and it can be found in the abandoned den. When equipped by the night, it summons 3 tiny, ghostly weaverlings. They are miniature spiders made of pure silvery silk, and they scuttle about the night's feet, autonomously attacking nearby enemies with a tenacious, loyal determination. They are the final fading echo of an entire civilization. They are all that remains of the Weaver's presence in the kingdom of Hallownest. 3 small silver ghosts in the memory of silk. A single, uninfected weaver can still be found in the abandoned weaver's den. It is a small, frightened creature that flees from the night upon approach, scuttling into a hidden passage and disappearing into the dark. Perhaps it was accidentally left behind during the evacuation. Perhaps it chose to stay, bound to the den by a loyalty stronger than the fear of the infection. Perhaps it simply could not bear to leave the looms that its family had operated for generations. We do not know. It simply runs and we let it go. There is something deeply peaceful about that small fleeing weaver. It is not hostile. It is not infected. It is simply afraid. And in Deepnest, fear is the most natural, most reasonable, most profoundly sane response to everything. The departure of the Weavers left a void in Deepnest that was, paradoxically, even more terrifying than their presence had been. The Weaver's silk had served as a stabilizing force throughout the entire region. Their protective wards had kept the worst of the feral creatures at bay, maintaining an uneasy but functional ecosystem. Their presence had given Deepnest a veneer of intelligence and order, thin as a spider's thread, but undeniably present. With them gone, the remaining beasts of Deepnest had nothing left to contain them. The balance shattered. The failed tramway continued to rust in the dark, the spiderwebs growing thicker and denser over the dead metal, undisturbed now by the gentle maintaining hands that once kept the threads from choking the machinery entirely. The white silk became heavy, sagging, laden with dust and moisture. The tramcars slowly disappeared beneath the layers of webbing, becoming soft, shapeless mounds in the dark, barely recognizable as man-made objects at all. The dirt carvers and the corpse creepers eventually fell prey to the infection themselves. Creatures that had once been apex predators, hunting with terrifying efficiency and primal cunning, became mindless, shambling husks, wandering the same tunnels they had once ruled as undisputed masters. They still attacked anything that moved, driven by the infection's base hostility, but their movements were slower, less coordinated, less precise. They were no longer predators, they were puppets, jerked into motion by the burning golden light of the moth goddess who had invaded their dreams. Even the stalking devouts, the loyal elite guards of the Beast Queen, eventually fell. Their impenetrable physical armor could protect their bodies, but it could not protect their minds from the dream-born plague. They sat in the corridors outside Hera's den, still technically positioned to guard her, still occupying the post they had sworn to defend, but their minds were gone. They attacked anything that approached, not out of loyalty to their sleeping queen, but out of infected, purposeless, meaningless rage. Their sacrifice had become a cruel parody of devotion. Let us pause here and speak of Hornet, one last time. Because Hornet's relationship to Deepnest is the emotional thread that ties the entire lore of this terrible place together. Hornet does not live in Deepnest. By the time the night encounters her, she has long since left the dark. She patrols the upper reaches of Hallownest, guarding the seals, watching the entrances, testing the knight's worthiness. She is a sentinel, a protector, a warrior bound by duty to both her father's legacy and her mother's sacrifice. But Deepnest is her home. It is where she was born. It is where her mother sleeps. It is where the weavers taught her to fight, taught her the art of silk, taught her the ways of survival that have kept her alive long after the rest of the kingdom has fallen to ruin. When the knight defeats Hornet for the second time, in the ruins of Kingdom's Edge, she grants the knight the king's brand, the magical seal that opens the door to the abyss. This is Hornet's final test. She is determined that the knight is worthy, that the knight is hollow enough, strong enough, and determined enough to potentially succeed where the Hollow Knight failed. She is in essence giving the knight permission to try to end the plague. But what does this mean for Hera? Hornet knows that to break the seals on the Temple of the Black Egg, the knight must kill the 3 dreamers, and one of those dreamers is her mother. Hornet, by granting the knight the ability to proceed, is implicitly accepting that her mother must die. She is choosing the salvation of the kingdom, the potential end of the infection, over the life of the person she loves most. And when the knight finally strikes Hera with the dream nail, ending her sleep and breaking the final seal, Hornet appears by the empty bed and grieves. The moment is all the more devastating because we know that Hornet made a conscious decision to allow this to happen. She did not resist. She did not fight the knight at the entrance to the beast's den. She stepped aside. She let it happen because she understood, as her mother had understood, that some sacrifices cannot be avoided. It is the final, devastating irony of the bargain. Hera sacrificed her life so that Hornet could live. And Hornet, decades later, sacrificed her mother's last remnant in the physical world so that the kingdom might be saved. The daughter's sacrifice mirrors the mother's, a cycle of loss and love and letting go that spans generations. Let that understanding settle softly. It is not a heavy thought, it is a gentle one. A mother loved a daughter loved a mother. And when the time came, both of them let go. You can let go too. You are holding nothing that cannot be released. The dark, terrifying heart of the kingdom finally stopped beating. The ecosystem that had resisted the Pale King, that had resisted civilization, that had resisted order and light and progress for millions of years, was finally brought low. Not by industry, not by armies, not by the worm's blind in light, but by a dream. A single, burning, golden dream that crept into the minds of every sleeping creature in the kingdom, no matter how deep, no matter how dark, no matter how fiercely they had refused the waking world. The radiance could reach even the deepest places through the simple universal act of sleep, and that is perhaps the most terrifying lore implication of all. The Pale King built the Hollow Knight to contain the radiance within a vessel. He recruited the Dreamers to lock the prison with their sleeping minds. He engineered a solution built on containment, on seals, on walls and locks and chains. But the radiance was a goddess of dreams, and dreams cannot be walled out. They seep through cracks. They slip beneath doors. They find the tiny, vulnerable gap between waking and sleeping and pour through like golden water. Deepnest, which had resisted everything, which had been too hostile, too feral, too fundamentally opposed to order to ever be conquered, was conquered by a dream. The irony is almost unbearable, but irony fades, tragedy fades, even the golden light of the moth goddess fades, eventually, as the infection slowly burns itself out in the abandoned, depopulated tunnels. Everything goes quiet in the end. Let us take one final, slow, meditative walk through Deepnest, not as an explorer, not as a warrior, but as a ghost, as a thought, as someone who has already heard the entire story and now simply wants to visit the places where it happened, one last time before sleep takes everything away. We begin at the entrance, the Mantis village gates, the massive iron doors that the Sisters of Battle once opened and closed with the practiced efficiency of a military checkpoint. The gates are closed now, permanently sealed. The hinges have rusted shut. The metal is cold, the surface covered in a thin layer of condensation from the humidity of the fungal wastes above. Beyond the gates, the stone drops away sharply, and the warm green glow of the mushroom forest is replaced by absolute impenetrable blackness. You pass through the gates, you drift downward through the first layers of the dark. The tunnels here are narrow, winding, carved eons ago by Garpedes that have long since moved on or died. The walls are rough, covered in a fine layer of dry white dust that was once living webbing. The silence is immense. There are no dirt carvers bursting from the earth. There are no deeplings skittering across the ceiling. The infection has burned through them all, and then the infection itself burned out, leaving behind empty husks and scattered, fossilized tumours of dried orange residue. You pass through a wider cavern. The floor is littered with the cracked, empty shells of creatures that died centuries ago. Some are curled into fetal positions, their legs drawn tight against their bodies, frozen in the last moment of the infection's grip. Some are stretched out flat, as though they simply laid down and stopped functioning. The air smells faintly of something dry and ancient, like very old paper or the inside of a stone cave that has not been opened in 1,000 years. In the corner of the cavern, barely visible in the absolute dark, sits a corpse creeper husk. It has not moved in centuries. The spider inside died along with the shell it inhabited, creating a layered fossil, a creature within a creature, both of them now nothing more than dry, brittle exoskeletons. It is no longer terrifying, it is simply historical, an artifact, a museum piece in a museum with no visitors. You drift deeper, following the gentle downward slope of the tunnels, passing through corridors that were once filled with the sounds of skittering legs and hissing breath. They are silent now. The only sound is the very faint, barely perceptible drip of water from somewhere far above. A single drop falling from the distant blue lake, trickling down through miles of stone, arriving here as a tiny rhythmic percussion. Drip, drip, drip. It is the heartbeat of the earth, steady and unhurried, patient as geology. You arrive at the failed tramway. The tramcars are still here, sitting on their broken tracks, but they are barely recognizable. The white webbing has grown so thick over the decades that the steel carriages have become soft, rounded shapes, like snowdrifts made of silk. The seats inside are covered in a blanket of fine white threads. The control panels are buried. The tracks themselves have been slowly consumed by the stone, the metal oxidizing and merging with the mineral deposits until the boundary between technology and geology has become indistinguishable. The tram pass is still here, somewhere buried under the silk. It glows faintly, a tiny warm pulse of light in the absolute dark, like a firefly that forgot to stop glowing, a remnant of a world that believed in schedules and destinations and progress. It asks for nothing now, it simply glows. You continue westward, drifting through the long, winding passage that leads toward the distant village. The tunnels here are choked with old webbing, the strands so thick and dense that they form a solid white wall in some places. You pass through them like a ghost because that is what you are tonight. You're a thought moving through memory. The distant village appears ahead, suspended over the abyss. The buildings are still there, their stone walls remarkably well preserved by the dry, windless air of the deep. The benches inside are still arranged in their careful, inviting rows. But the cultists are gone. The infection that animated them has long since faded, and their husks have crumbled to dust on the benches, leaving behind only faint grey outlines where bodies once sat. It looks like a village of shadows, a community of ghosts, a place where the memory of habitation is stronger than any remaining physical evidence of it. The stalking devouts that once guarded the corridors have fallen where they stood. Their massive armoured bodies lie crumpled on the ground, their thick masks resting face down in the dust. Even in death, even in decay, their armour is intact. It will outlast the stone around it. It will outlast the memories. Someday, long after Hallownest has been completely forgotten, some future creature will find a devout mask buried in the earth and wonder what kind of being could have needed such impenetrable protection. And in the innermost chamber, the beast's den, the stone altar is empty. The silk that once covered it has thinned to almost nothing, a few gossamer threads catching the non-existent light. Hera is gone. Her physical form dissolved when the seal was broken. There's nothing left of the Beast Queen except the impression in the stone where she lay for centuries, a slight, shallow depression in the rock, worn smooth by the weight of a sleeping god. Hornet stood here once, in this exact spot. She stood over this empty bed and bowed her head. She said nothing. She grieved in silence as the mantises had taught her to grieve, with discipline and without display. And then she left, walking back through the dark toward the surface, toward the temple, toward the final confrontation with the infection. She did not look back. There was nothing left to look back at. You drift away from the beast's den, floating back through the distant village, back through the webbed corridors, back through the silent tunnels. You pass through the weaver's den. The looms are still here, standing in the dark like skeletal sentinels. They're covered in dust and brittle webbing, their mechanisms frozen, their shuttles resting in mid-stroke. The last thread they were weaving will never be completed. It hangs from the loom in a single silvery strand, catching nothing, going nowhere. A sentence left forever unfinished. The small, frightened weaver that once hid here has long since left or died. The hidden passage it used to flee is sealed with old webbing, dry and fragile as ancient lace. The den is empty. The magic has faded from the silk. The protective wards are gone. The histories woven into the walls are illegible now. Their meaning lost. Their enchantments expired. They are just threads. Pretty, silver threads hanging in the dark, meaning nothing to anyone who cannot read them, and there is no one left who can read them. You drift through the chamber where Nosk once lurked. The lair is still piled with old husks and broken shells, but they have settled and compressed over the centuries, forming a thick, uneven carpet of ancient chitin. The corpses of the vessels are still here, their small pale masks staring blankly at the ceiling, their hollow eyes as empty as the day they were discarded. Nosk's own remains have degraded entirely, the infection that swelled its body having long since evaporated, leaving behind only a dark, oily stain on the stone. The counterfeit shell lies nearby, wrinkled and flat like a deflated costume. There are no more reflections in the dark, no more doppelgangers leading you down false paths, no more hope to weaponize. The trap is permanently disarmed, the lure is broken, the monster is gone. You drift upward now, slowly, rising through the tunnels like a warm breath ascending from the earth. You pass the hot springs where the water still bubbles gently, warm and blue-white, healing nothing, because there is nothing left to heal. The springs do not care. They have been bubbling since before the Pale King arrived, and they will be bubbling long after the memory of his kingdom has dissolved into geological time. The water is patient. The water is eternal. The water simply is. You pass through the border between Deepnest and the fungal wastes. The stone becomes warmer. The air becomes wetter. The faintest hint of green light begins to filter through the rock. You are leaving the dark behind. You are ascending back toward the surface, back toward the world of rain and ruins, leaving the deepest, darkest place in the world to rest in its own silence. Deepnest asks for nothing. It asks for nothing from the Pale King, and he tried to give it everything anyway. It asked for nothing from the Weavers, and they gave it intelligence and beauty anyway. It asked for nothing from Hera, and she gave it a kingdom anyway. And now, empty and silent and dark, it asks for nothing from you. It is simply there, a place, a memory, a story that has been told and is now finished. The tramcars are silent, the webs are still, the spiders are gone. The beast is asleep, and then she is gone, and then there is only the empty altar and the impression in the stone. The dirt carvers have stopped burrowing. The Garpedes have stopped grinding. The corpse creepers have stopped pretending. Nosk has been shattered. The midwife sits behind her wall in the distant village, hungry and waiting and alone, perhaps the last living thing in the deep, sustained by a loyalty and a hunger that refuse to die even when everything else has. The grand, terrifying isolation of Deepnest is complete. There is nothing left to fear in the dark because the dark has consumed everything, including itself, and in consuming everything it has become peaceful. The hostility has burned away, the danger has faded, the predators have died. What remains is simply darkness, pure and absolute and ancient. The same darkness that existed before the Pale King arrived, before the radiance burned, before any creature crawled through any tunnel for any reason. It is the original dark, the first dark, the dark that was here when the world was young and will be here when the world is old, and it is not frightening, it is simply old. And old things, if you listen to them carefully, have a deep, abiding peace about them. They have seen everything. They have survived everything. They have nothing left to prove. Let the image of the spinning webs and the dark tunnels begin to sink away now. Let them drift downward, very slowly, like silt settling in perfectly still water. The sharp edges of the story are softening. The terrifying details are becoming softer, rounder, less defined. The names are fading. Hera, Nosk, the Weavers, the Garpedes, the Midwife, the stalking Devouts. They are becoming quieter, less distinct, more like shapes seen through frosted glass than vivid, threatening images. They are part of the scenery now, part of the background, fading into the warm dark behind your eyelids. Let down your guard. There is nothing left to guard against. The story is over. The kingdom has fallen. The creatures have stilled. The spiders have fled. The queen has dissolved. The seal is broken. Everything that was going to happen has already happened. You're listening to the aftermath. You're listening to the silence that follows the last page of a very long, very deep book. There is only the comfortable weight of your blanket now, heavy and protective, like a shield against the waking world, like the white silk of the weavers wrapped softly around you, insulating you from the noise and the cold and the light. Your blanket is your cocoon, your bed is your den, and the den is warm and the den is safe and nothing in the dark can reach you here. Your thoughts are slowing down. They are moving like heavy limbs through deep, warm water. Each thought takes a little longer to form, a little longer to complete, a little longer to dissolve back into nothing. The sentences in your mind are getting shorter, the gaps between them are getting longer. And in those gaps there is just warmth, just stillness, just the quiet hum of your own body at rest. The story of the beast and the worm, the history of the silk and the dark, the bargain and the birth and the sleep. It is all just background noise now. It is fading. It is becoming a gentle, low hum, like the distant vibration of the earth itself, like the deep, resonant thrum of the Garpede heard from very, very far away. Not threatening, not close, just a sound, just a texture, just a feeling that is slowly merging with the feeling of your own breath rising and falling. The darkness behind your eyelids is not the darkness of Deepnest. It is not hostile. It is not full of teeth. It is not hiding predators or mimics or traps. It is simply the comfortable, velvet, soft darkness of rest. It is the kind of dark that wraps around you like a warm blanket. The kind of dark that cushions your thoughts. The kind of dark that makes the edges of the world go blurry and soft and safe. Let us do a final check. Let us make sure that everything is settled, everything is still, everything is ready for sleep. Your forehead. Is there any tension in your forehead? Let it go. Let the skin smooth out. Let the muscles above your eyebrows release. They do not need to hold anything. There is nothing to concentrate on. There is nothing to figure out. Let your forehead be smooth and calm and still. Your eyes, they are closed. The lids are heavy, resting comfortably like two small warm blankets covering your vision. Let them stay closed. Let them be heavy. There is nothing to see. The story is being told in darkness, and the darkness is kind. Your jaw. Is your jaw clenched? Let it drop just slightly. Let a tiny gap form between your upper and lower teeth. Let your tongue rest heavily against the floor of your mouth. Your jaw does not need to hold itself in place. It can simply hang, loose and comfortable, supported by nothing but gravity and the softness of your pillow. Your shoulders, let them drop. They have been holding tension all day, carrying the invisible weight of everything you had to do, everything you had to remember, everything you had to worry about. They can put that weight down now. It is not theirs to carry tonight. Let them sink into the surface beneath you, heavy and warm and perfectly still. Your hands. Are they holding anything? Are your fingers curled? Let them open just slightly. Let your palms face upward or downward or sideways, wherever they are most comfortable. Let your fingers rest like the legs of the corpse creeper, but gentle and still and safe, not hiding anything, not preparing to spring, just resting. Your chest. Feel it rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. Each breath is slower than the last. Each inhale is a little shallower, a little gentler, a little less necessary. Your body knows how to breathe. It has been doing it all day without your help. You can stop paying attention to it now. You can let it happen on its own, like the hot springs bubbling in the deep, automatic and eternal, and requiring absolutely no effort from you at all. Your legs, they are heavy, they are warm. They are sinking into the mattress, the surface of the bed yielding gently beneath their weight. Your knees are soft, your ankles are loose, your feet are relaxed, the toes pointing wherever they naturally point, holding nothing, going nowhere. Everything is still, everything is settled, everything is at rest. You are not a vessel that must contain a god. You're not a knight that must navigate a labyrinth of traps and horrors. You're not a queen that must sacrifice her waking life for a child she will never see grow up. You're not a weaver that must flee a dying kingdom. You're not a mantis lord that must guard a gate for eternity. You're not a hunter in the dark. You are simply a person, resting quietly in a comfortable place. At the end of a day that is now, finally, completely over, there is nothing left to do. There's nowhere left to go. There's nothing left to solve or fix or worry about. The day is done. The story is done. The lore is complete. The kingdom is asleep. Hallownest is asleep. Every corner of it, every cavern, every tunnel, every ruin. The City of Tears is quiet, the rain falling endlessly on empty streets. The cobblestones are slick and clean, reflecting the pale light of lumafly lanterns that no one tends anymore. The fountains have stopped flowing. The grand buildings stand empty, their windows dark, but the rain continues. It will always continue. It is the one constant in Hallownest, the one thing that never stopped, the one sound that will persist until the blue lake runs dry, which will be long after anyone is left to notice. Listen to the rain. Shh, shh, shh. It is washing away the dust. It is washing away the memories. It is washing away the waking world, drop by drop, until there is nothing left but the sound itself. The sound of water against stone. Rhythmic, eternal, perfectly, absolutely predictable. The forgotten crossroads are still. The orange vines that once pulsed with the infection's light have dimmed to a faint warm glow, like the embers of a fire that has been burning for centuries and has nothing left to consume. They pulse slowly, slowly, slowly. The fungal wastes are quiet. The massive purple mushrooms have stopped bouncing. The spores have settled. The fungal core's deep bass thrum has faded to a whisper, a barely perceptible vibration in the stone beneath your feet. The Mantis village gates are closed. The Sisters of Battle sit motionless on their thrones, their nail lances resting across their laps, their eyes staring forward into the dark. They do not sleep. But they are still. They are always still. The crystal peak is dark. The pink glowing crystals that once hummed with energy have dimmed. The mining equipment has stopped clattering. The conveyor belts have stopped turning. The entire mountain is one enormous silent geode, its beauty hidden in the dark. The resting grounds are peaceful. The gravestones stand in silent, ordered rows, marking the deaths of bugs who lived and loved and fought and lost. The spirits that once drifted among the stones have found their rest. They are gone. The graves are simply stones now, cold and smooth and patient, and far, far below it all, in the deepest, darkest corner of the world, Deepnest is asleep. The tunnels are empty, the webs are still. The predators are gone, the silk is fading, the darkness is absolute and ancient and peaceful. Hera is gone, but the impression she left in the stone remains, and in that impression, in that shallow, smooth depression, there are a memory of sleep so deep and so complete that it feels almost like a blessing. A mother who chose to sleep forever so that her daughter could live. A sleep so profound that it locked a god in a prison of dreams Let your breathing match hers, the breathing she had when she still lay on the altar, slow, deep, endless, each breath a full, complete cycle. In through the nose, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. Pause, just a moment, and then out through the mouth, feeling the warmth leave your body, carrying with it the last tiny remnants of tension, of thought, of awareness. In and out, in and out. The rain is falling, the silk is vibrating, the earth is humming, the dark is warm, the story is over, the kingdom is at rest. In and out. The weaver's lullaby is still playing somewhere deep in the earth, a low, almost imperceptible hum woven into the stone itself. It is the last remnant of their song, their story, their magic. It is not a warning, it is not a call to action. It is a lullaby, a simple, ancient lullaby, sung in a language made of silk, playing on an infinite gentle loop for anyone who descends far enough into the dark to hear it. You have descended far enough tonight. You have heard the entire story. You have visited every corner of the deep. You have met the beast and the worm, the weavers and the devouts, the midwife and the mimicry and the monster in the dark. You have walked through the failed tramway and the distant village, and the weaver's den and Nosk's lair. You have seen the masks and the silk and the armour and the ruins, and now the story is complete. There is nothing left to tell. There is nothing left to hear. There is only the dark and the silk and the slow, deep, endless breathing of a queen who made a deal with a god and went to sleep. Your breath is slowing. Your heartbeat is slowing. The intervals between your thoughts are growing longer and longer, stretching out like silk being pulled from a spool, thinner and thinner, until the thread is so fine that you can barely feel it, and then it breaks softly, silently, and the thought is gone, and there is just warmth. The tramcars are silent, the rain is falling, the webs are still, the kingdom is asleep. Rest your mind, rest your body, let go of the story. It is not yours to carry. It belongs to the dark now. Let go of the day. It is finished. It cannot be lived again. It is done, completely and irreversibly done, and you survived it, and that is enough. That is always enough. Let go of everything, every worry, every plan, every unfinished thought, every small anxiety, every tomorrow. Let it all dissolve, like the infection fading from the abandoned tunnels of Deepnest, like the golden light of the moth goddess slowly burning itself out in the empty, silent dark. You're drifting now, untethered, weightless, sinking softly into the quiet deep like a feather falling through perfectly still water. There is no bottom, there is no destination. There is only the gentle, endless, comfortable descent. The further you drift, the quieter it becomes. The further you drift, the warmer it becomes. The further you drift, the softer everything becomes, until the world is nothing but a gentle, dark, warm blur, like looking at the stars through closed eyelids, like listening to music through a thick wall, like remembering a dream you had months ago that you cannot quite piece together. It does not need to be pieced together. It does not need to be understood. It simply needs to be felt. And you are feeling it now. The slow, warm, heavy pull of sleep, drawing you down and gently, inevitably into the deepest, quietest, safest place you've ever been. Sleep. Sleep deeply. Sleep the way Hera slept. Fully, completely, without reservation, without anxiety, without regret. A sleep so deep that the world above you could crumble to dust and you would not notice. A sleep so complete that nothing can disturb it. Not the scratching of the dirt carvers, not the thrum of the Garpedes, not the hiss of the corpse creepers, not the false reflections of Nosk, nothing. The kingdom rests. The beast rests. The weavers have gone home. The mantis lords sit on their thrones. The rain continues to fall, and you can rest alongside all of them. You can join the great, silent, sleeping kingdom, drifting down into the warm dark where every story eventually ends, and where every ending is, finally, gently, peaceful. The dark is gentle tonight. The dark is safe tonight. The dark is yours. Good night.